Okay, this looks like September the 19th. These are just really fast forwarded versions of my dash cam, all the things I run around and do. But while I'm showing, all the places I go, in like 10x speed, basically, I just thought I would talk about a few things. Um, Number one being, uh, I figured out through studying psychology topics that we're all basically prone to pick people that have similar personality traits to the people that raised us. Like um, I've seen so many examples. There's, I could say, like one of my used to be friends that owes me quite a bit of money. He chose a woman that is just like his mother, and I didn't even realize, how much his wife and his mother, the personality traits were the same, and that the same goes for all but one. My the sisters, or my middle aunt's the only one who chose outside her normal, uh, but she did choose a lot of narcissistic men to begin with. My youngest aunt did the same thing, which wasn't her fault. She just chose basically people that she uh, basically what felt normal, you know. And since my grandmother's the one that raised her, you know, um, it has nothing to do with the fact that her father wasn't there for her. It was more, you know, that my grandmother spoiled her to an extent, but then just she doesn't really care anymore. But the same type of I've seen the same thing in, you could say Taylor. She chose her first husband, whose parents were officers, and because he was a narcissist, but she was with him for 10 years. And to me, he doesn't have an excuse for what he did. And the same can be said for her current husband. He's a narcissist using grandiose gestures, to so that's just what I another thing I've learned is that narcissism is pretty ordinary and pretty common. I mean it's there's very few that have the ability to put themselves in someone else's shoes. And um, and I don't know if she remembers this, but I know I do. Her best friend Jennifer and her mother Alma is the one that introduced us in the very beginning when she was 18, I believe, and I had just gotten over my divorce. It was like early 2007, around 2008, and um, it's she just we dated for a week. I always had her home on time, just like her father wanted, and then one night she just disappears. No big deal. She pops back in, pops back into Dover 10 years later or so, and one thing she did tell everybody at the Buccaneers that she was 6 years sober, and that didn't make sense now that I think about it, because she said her and her current husband got clean together, and that couldn't be possible if she was only with him for like 2 years before she messaged me on Facebook 3 different times, to get a job at the Buccaneer. And first 2 times I didn't pay much attention to it, but once she did get a job over there, she, started chatting with me on Facebook Messenger. She made all her own decisions, and it's, I really, it really doesn't matter, but all the lies and the compartmentalizing of people and the way she rationalized things to herself, about, well, while we were talking for that 2.5 year period, she said, "Oh, I knew you longer." No, she didn't really know me longer. She just knew me first before she even knew her husband. But that doesn't mean you know a person for any amount of time that you weren't in their lives. But um, so, and what else was there? Hmm. Something else I was going to talk about. The fact that lying is like a social norm. People always, have always lied to an extent. Some people much more worse than others, but little white lies to build somebody up is different than the outright lies or the exaggerations that a lot of people seem to be like mimicking, the people that they see as they emulate the, the leadership basically. And there's just so much misinformation out there. It's unreal. That's why I don't get on Facebook. I only get on YouTube, for to spread a message, to stop misinformation, to make people aware of cybersecurity um, scams that are going around, voice cloning scams, and because even my old Facebook page is still up. And if any person wanted to see it, they could look at it and see exactly what I'm about and how I felt, you know, to this day. Because I never could get it taken down, even though I don't have control of it. But these sped up videos are just right now. It's still on the 19th, but I've made like 300 songs, which you could say about 100 because there's 3 different versions of every song usually. Um, I've created a website, created a blog with over 300 posts, and several interactive games to actually learn these narcissistic tendencies and biases and fallacies and all these things that our brain just, it's kind of hardwired into us in a way. It's kind of like whenever you get a new new vehicle, and then all of a sudden you see that vehicle everywhere. It's That's the Baader-Meinhof illusion, and the level of cognitive dissonance my family must feel, because I mean, my dad is just so sure he's right. It's just they think they're special. They've thought ours is flat. They've thought, you know, all these rich billionaires control the world, and they're the most manipulative and controlling people, and the most backstabbing of anybody. It's my mom, my sister especially. It's it's just amazing how one honest person who does nothing but nice things for his family, for the even the old neighbors that slandered my name a long time ago. I did nothing but nice things for them too, and they're the ones who turned on me, which I tried to resolve the situation in every way possible. The neighbor that was next to me, believed she had, she deserved a fenced-in backyard when I'm the one who got permission to put it in. I'm the one who put it in. I'm the one who didn't get paid to put it in. And I've never sold it to her, and she was the only one who had a fenced-in backyard because of me. So when I took it back and she had tried to have me charged for simply taking something back that I had put up for her, didn't charge her cent for. That's after my family gave her daughter a car. I bought her daughter 4 tires. It just floors me that people are so greedy and vindictive and spiteful and jealous and everything else. And uh, I can't understand that. It just doesn't make any sense. It's just uh, that level of, like hatred or, spite or jealousy, which they may have been just jealous that, I wasn't working at the time because, uh, the daughter actually, all she did was complain all the time, and I'm sure she probably complained about me too, just like my sister does, or did in the past, you know, always playing the victim. My sister's always played the victim. There's no doubt about that. Mm. And the fact that my parents refuse to even acknowledge my side or hear it, even after I've done all the research, and are basically corrupting my daughter, just like my sister corrupted or spread, she said bad things about my aunt to her kids, dividing that family. Now she's dividing me and my daughter. It's like they get some sort of sick joy out of dividing the family up. And it's just sad that they have nothing better to do with their lives than cause pain and misery when they're the miserable ones who you know, won't stop trying to be parents when they're not parents. Stop putting their nose in things that doesn't belong. It's and Granny's never going to do anything because she's just she's too self-centered and the grandiose narcissist and the matriarch of the family. That's just a fact. I mean, I've seen it in texts. Any text I send her, if it's not about her, she doesn't even respond. You know, and I know I could have been anything I wanted to be, a doctor, a scientist, cybersecurity specialist, or whatever, had my mother taken the time to help me figure out the disorder that I have. But even my mother and sister didn't even recognize the disorder in their own nephew and son. It's just, and he had all the obvious symptoms, whereas mine didn't hit till I was 16. Um, it's it's different for every person, but their remedy is just to block out the world and just drink and pop their gummies until they can't remember it anymore, which is fine. But I wish they'd really just keep their religion and their opinions to themselves, or either admit they're wrong. Because I've proven them wrong so many times. It's uh, not even once has my mom admitted that she was wrong, even with screenshots and proof. No amount of evidence will ever prove it to them. So I don't even try because I don't need their validation. I know I'm better than them. I know I'm smarter than them. It's pretty simple. Because I was a kid who went to gifted and talented, who did piano, did all these different activities, graduated with a 3.6, GPA and with honors and got a scholarship. You know, but my sister never had any aspirations further than high school. And she's the one who's probably miserable because she thinks uh, cutting people down, even her own family, even in you know light, somewhat lighthearted ways, all the time, it becomes a toxic, pattern. And that's basically what my nephews are going to see as normal, and they may end up treating whatever women they meet that same way, and it's going to affect them in the future. I know she's not thinking about that because she's only thinking of herself and how right she thinks she is because she's just like my dad. That's all. Oh, he for so long he kept pushing the flat Earth crap on me, and it would make me so angry. But then I would talk to some online friends. They would give me examples that I could use to try to convince them that it's not. And then I watched one YouTube video that basically explained away every bit of the entire video that the flat Earth video that I had watched and he had watched. You know, through different uh, scientific ways. Because science, if you can test and retest something, if the tests are reproducible, we've known that the Earth is round since the 1500s practically. So the fact that my dad has, uh, well, he used to say he was right and Granny was wrong because she listened to man. Well, he listens to a man on YouTube preach. So who's listening to what man? And if I'm not mistaken, in the Bible it says God created man in his own image. So what does that make God a man? It's just stories that people have passed down through generations. Man is the one who put all these Dead Sea Scrolls together himself, and the Roman Catholics could have left out or put back in, put in whatever they want, but it's all been touched by man. And who knows that those people back then were divinely inspired? Who, can actually verify any of that? We're just taking somebody's, man's word for it, and man. Yes, there's been so many bloody wars fought over religion when they basically all have the same 10 guiding principles, and and in humanity we are literally all the same. We're all human. We all make mistakes, but some people are willing to admit when they're wrong, and those are the people that actually learn and grow. You know, because if you can't admit you're wrong when you actually are wrong, then you're not learning anything. And if your mouth's moving all the time, then you're not listening. There's anybody who blames others, there's usually three fingers pointing back to blame them. But there's just so many toxic tendencies out there that just aren't right. You know, but it's ordinary and it's just normal. It's like someone told me it's a me society. It is a me society right now, but it hasn't always been a me society. It's just gotten a lot worse since basically the pandemic. And I was almost, I was susceptible, like when the anti-vaccine movement started. I almost believed that, because my daughter was just born, and I was worried because she had, upper GI issues, or she was, I almost bought into it, but then, you know, I did a little research and I found out that it was one British doctor who got basically kicked out of Great Britain for spreading his misinformation or cherry-picked, you know, pieces of data that he used to spread those anti-vaccine um, conspiracies. And the same can be said for the moon landing hoax. That is one man. He started that in the 1970s, and it didn't gain popularity until the pandemic. I'm sure there was a few niche niche groups out there that believed it before then, but once the pandemic hit, that's when everybody was stuck in their houses, nothing to do but watch YouTube or TV, and then those conspiracies. And mainly it's because everybody was vulnerable and worried, and that's why people believed all these conspiracies so easily, because they were looking for a reason. And one other point I want to make is, like, when the Indians had this land before even, the Christopher Columbus came over here, whenever they couldn't explain something that happened, who did they um, blame it on? They would blame it on the spirits or the god, the gods that they, worship, basically. They, anything that they could not, readily explain. That's so. If the Indians did that, beforehand, they had their own religious rituals and whatnot. Um, who do you think came up with religion as a whole? It's just, really, it's just a way to comfort people who are nearing the end of their life. I mean, everybody's free to believe whatever they want, but when their beliefs harm others or cause others suffering, that that's when it seems really wrong. And I could say, like, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and religion have been the single, cause the most deaths throughout history, besides those major diseases like the bubonic plague, the Spanish flu, and all those other pandemics that. Uh, but if you think about it, we're all the same, and it's just a illusion of the brain, or something in the brain, or a belief in some sort of higher power, because we want to believe that there's some sort of power that balances everything out. But I don't believe in luck. I don't believe in superstition. And I believe in reason and logic. That's why I ask so many questions like why, why, And when I get silence or no answers, that's when I start to get a little suspicious, or start to wonder, why are they being so quiet? Like my family, for instance, or why can't they answer these certain questions? Or what are they hiding? Or when did they, you know, uh, it's just never ending. But at least I can I can sleep at night. The only reason they can is because they found a way to rationalize it somehow to themselves, which I don't know how you could rationalize treating any family members the way they do. It's just unbelievable, but it's true. And until I see, actual actions that would make me believe that they aren't the monsters that I think they are, then I'll always think that, because actions speak louder than words, and words are just meaningless if the actions don't go along with them. So you can forgive, but I won't forgive until I see the actions to go along with any words.